The Canadian economy, already contending with inflation, tariffs, and a cost of living crisis, is also watching a steady and ongoing slump in the housing market.
Like 30s or 40s, because nowadays it's so expensive. I don't know if I'll ever afford to buy a house.
Across Canada, what was once a real estate gold rush is now grinding to a halt. The housing market that fueled Canada's growth for nearly 2 decades has hit a wall, and the numbers are brutal. In Metro Vancouver alone, more than 2,500 new condo units remain unsold, double the figure from last year. These empty towers are no longer signs of prosperity but symbols of paralysis. Developers are desperate, buyers are disappearing, and Prime Minister Mark Carney faces his first true crisis as leader of a country running out of economic luck. On October 10, 2025, the national mood is grim. People are calling it the housing winter. Prices are sliding across the nation. The average home in Canada now sells for about $686,800 Canadian dollars, down 3.4% year over year. Condos, once the darling of investors, are down 5.3%, with an average price of around $486,000. Real estate listings have surged nearly 9%, signaling that sellers are trying to offload properties before values sink further. The number of homes on the market has climbed to nearly 195,000, the highest since the pandemic-era peak. National inventory is now at 4.4 months, suggesting the market is oversupplied. In Toronto, the story is even worse. September saw 5,765 sales, but prices fell again to an average of 971,500, nearly 6% lower than last year. More homes are selling only because they are being dumped at lower prices. Vancouver, Canada's most overheated housing market, has suddenly gone cold. Buyers who once lined up overnight for pre-sales are now vanishing. Developers are cutting prices, offering free parking stalls, cashback deals, and even returning deposits. Many projects that looked profitable on paper just a year ago are now underwater. Entire condo floors are sitting empty, while others have halted construction altogether because financing has dried up. The same story repeats in Calgary, Edmonton, and Montreal. The boom has turned into a freeze. The Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation warns this downturn could mirror the early 1990s crash. Analysts point to a combination of high construction costs, labor shortages, and rising mortgage rates as the main culprits. In some regions, builders report costs are up by 14% over last year, pushing many smaller companies to the brink. Financing that was once easy to obtain is now locked behind tougher lending standards. Banks are demanding proof of pre-sales before releasing construction loans, but pre-sales have all but disappeared. Developers call it a vicious cycle. They can't build without pre-sales, and buyers won't commit while prices are falling. Behind the headlines are real people paying the price. Small and medium-sized businesses that depend on the housing sector are being crushed. Furniture stores, appliance retailers, and home renovation suppliers are seeing sales collapse. In Toronto, one small business owner who runs a 30-employee appliance store said sales are down 40% from last year. "When condos don't sell, we don't sell," she said. "It's that simple." In Vancouver, a cafe owner near UBC said his daily customers have dropped sharply as hundreds of new condo units sit empty. Even rental markets are starting to cool as investors struggle to find tenants willing to pay high rents in older buildings while new unsold condos flood the market. The crisis has exposed the deep flaws in Canada's housing-dependent economy. For years, policymakers relied on real estate to drive growth. Now that engine is sputtering. The federal government's decision to slash immigration and foreign student quotas has further squeezed demand. Canada's intake of foreign students fell by more than 600,000 this year, and nearly 1 million temporary workers are now sidelined. Those groups were once the backbone of housing demand in cities like Toronto and Vancouver. Without them, demand for rentals and new condos is collapsing. Developers are left holding projects designed for buyers who no longer exist. The mood among homeowners is turning bleak. Many who bought during the 2021 to 2023 peak are now facing negative equity. One buyer in Richmond, British Columbia said his one-bedroom condo has lost 12% of its value in just a year. "I thought prices would always go up," he said, "but now I'm stuck with a mortgage bigger than the property." Real estate agents describe open houses with no visitors and entire condo buildings where lights stay off at night. Even investors who once treated real estate as a guaranteed profit are pulling out, unable to cover mortgage payments through rental income. Prime Minister Mark Carney has tried to project calm, but the political pressure is mounting. His government's flagship response, Build Canada Homes, launched last month with a $13 billion commitment to increase affordable housing supply. The plan aims to produce 500,000 new homes per year using modular and prefabricated construction methods. Carney has framed the effort as a wartime-style mobilization to restore affordability and stimulate the economy. But critics call it too little, too late. The opposition argues that building more homes won't fix a confidence crisis and that the government's restrictive immigration policy has already crippled demand. Others warn the program risks oversaturating the market even more. Carney's political balancing act is nearly impossible. On one hand, he must assure developers that Canada is still worth investing in. On the other, he must protect homeowners from financial ruin. His government faces growing anger from both sides. Homeowners blame him for inaction, developers accuse him of overregulation, and small businesses say they've been left to fend for themselves. Opposition leaders are now calling the housing crisis a referendum on Carney's leadership. They claim he ignored warnings from economists and allowed speculative excesses to spiral unchecked. Even within his own party, some members privately admit that his reputation as a financial wizard is on the line. The economic ripple effects are spreading fast. Construction employment, one of Canada's largest job sectors, is beginning to contract. A recent report predicts that 35,000 construction jobs could vanish by mid-2026 if current trends continue. Retail sales tied to housing, furniture, home goods, and renovation supplies have already fallen 8% year over year. Local tax revenues are dropping as property values decline, squeezing municipal budgets. Economists warn that if home prices fall another 10%, Canada could see a broader economic contraction that would shave up to 1% off national GDP. Meanwhile, mortgage stress tests and high interest rates are locking younger Canadians out of the market entirely. The average rate for a new 5-year mortgage hovers around 5%, double what it was in 2021. Many renters who once hoped to buy are giving up. One couple in Edmonton said they've decided to postpone buying for at least 2 years. "We don't want to catch a falling knife," the husband said. "Everyone we know who bought in 2022 regrets it." Their caution reflects a larger psychological shift. Canadians are losing faith in home ownership as a safe investment, a belief that had defined the national economy for decades. Developers say they are being squeezed from all directions. Rising material costs, worker shortages, and tighter credit have pushed some firms into bankruptcy. One Vancouver builder admitted during a press interview, "We're paying interest on holes in the ground." The Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation confirmed that at least 18 condo projects nationwide have been placed under receivership since January. Some developers are even refunding deposits because they cannot meet pre-sale requirements to secure financing. The once booming high-rise construction industry now faces paralysis. Carney insists his administration is taking decisive action. Alongside Build Canada Homes, his government has introduced a $5 billion Buy Canadian initiative aimed at boosting domestic production of building materials and reducing reliance on imported steel and aluminum. Both have been hit by United States tariffs. He has also promised zoning reforms to speed up development approvals and encourage densification near transit hubs. But so far, these measures have done little to restore confidence. Critics accuse him of being reactive instead of proactive, patching holes instead of fixing the foundation. The irony is that while Carney blames trade tensions and global inflation for Canada's woes, The United States housing market is rebounding. In America, construction starts are climbing again, buoyed by tax incentives and manufacturing investment. Trump's tariffs, which many predicted would hurt, have instead redirected industrial growth domestically. By contrast, Canada doubled down on speculation, red tape, and foreign capital. Now, with the bubble bursting, Ottawa is paying the price. This isn't just a market correction, said one Bay Street economist. It's a confidence crash. Across the provinces, political leaders are scrambling for damage control. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford has promised to slash red tape and expedite permits for 100,000 new homes, while British Columbia's government is offering tax breaks to buyers of first-time condos. But these gestures pale compared to the scale of the problem. Canada's household debt remains one of the highest in the world at 177% of disposable income, and every percentage point of price decline erodes consumer confidence further. The Bank of Canada has warned that a prolonged housing slump could threaten the stability of smaller regional lenders, particularly credit unions heavily exposed to real estate loans. On the ground, the crisis feels deeply personal. Families who stretched finances to buy during the boom now face sleepless nights. Retirees who relied on home equity are delaying plans to downsize. Young workers are leaving expensive cities in search of cheaper housing, draining urban economies of labor and spending power. A Vancouver restaurateur said his business has lost half its weekend staff because they moved to Alberta for lower rents. In Toronto, a local construction company cut 20% of its workforce in September. "We just don't have projects coming in anymore," the owner said. "It's like someone flipped a switch and the money stopped flowing." Economists see a grim short-term outlook. Many forecast continued weakness through 2026, with modest recovery only if trade tensions ease and mortgage rates decline. If tariffs remain and foreign capital stays out, the market could stagnate for years. The risk isn't just economic, it's political. The longer the crisis drags on, the more it erodes Carney's image as the steady technocrat who could steer Canada through turbulence. The opposition is already framing the downturn as Carney's crash, a label that could stick if prices keep falling. Still, there are faint signs of resilience. In cities like Edmonton and Montreal, where supply remains more balanced, modest price gains continue. The resale housing market has only dropped 5% year over year, suggesting some stability outside the major bubbles. Some developers are pivoting toward rental housing and modular construction, betting that affordability initiatives could revive demand in 2026. But these bright spots are small compared to the storm clouds looming over the national market. For now, Canadians are waiting and watching. Homeowners are clinging to shrinking equity, buyers are hesitating, and developers are holding their breath. Every indicator points toward deeper trouble unless bold action arrives soon. As one economist said bluntly, when housing stalls, everything else follows. Construction, retail, even cafes and dry cleaners. The housing slump is more than a market event. It's a national reckoning. And as of today, with Carney under fire and condos still empty, the question remains, will Canada recover? Or is this the year the dream of endless growth finally comes crashing down?
It's the main artery through the heart of the province, the QE2 connecting north and south.
This is what greets drivers on Highway 2 near Bowden, a billboard promoting Alberta joining the United States.
Somebody paid the money and they have perfect right to do so, but it's you might as well flush it down the toilet.
I think if anything else, it should be taken down and burned.
As of October 10, 2025, Canada faces its most serious unity crisis in decades. Alberta and Saskatchewan, two provinces that have long felt neglected by Ottawa, are once again in the spotlight after an explosive billboard appeared on Alberta's busiest highway. The sign, installed near the town of Bowden, read Alberta, the 51st state, and within hours, photos spread across social media, igniting debates from Calgary to Quebec. The message came from a group calling itself the America Fund.
It has absolutely nothing to do with the town of Bowden. This is a private company that sold that signage.
founded by members of the 2019 Wexit movement, which once promoted Western independence. The group now claims thousands of small donations from
There's too many
ordinary
taxes
Albertans
here,
who say
right?
they are
That's one
tired
of
of
the
paying
biggest
high
things.
taxes and receiving little recognition from Ottawa. The town of Bowdoin was forced to issue a public statement disassociating itself from the campaign after receiving angry phone calls and even threats. For many, this billboard is not just a political stunt. It's a mirror reflecting decades of frustration. In Alberta, the movement taps into a deep well of economic resentment. The province contributes roughly 17% of Canada's GDP, yet receives less than 4% of federal equalization transfers. Between 2015 and 2024, Albertans paid an estimated 240 billion Canadian dollars more into federal coffers than they received in return. Critics say this imbalance has turned Alberta into the country's cash cow, funding social programs in provinces like Quebec and Ontario while facing budget deficits at home. The oil and gas industry, which accounts for more than 25% of Alberta's economy, has been hit by federal carbon taxes, pipeline delays, and restrictions on exploration. For workers in Fort McMurray or Red Deer, Ottawa's climate agenda feels like a knife in the back. A refinery worker interviewed by Global News summed it up simply: "They use our oil, tax our paychecks, and call us polluters." Saskatchewan shares many of these grievances. Its agricultural economy has suffered under fluctuating grain prices and export bottlenecks. The province produces about 40% of Canada's wheat and 30% of its potash, but farmers say they are drowning in red tape. In 2024, drought conditions reduced crop yields by 18%, while fuel and fertilizer costs rose 22%. Many producers accuse federal regulators of making it harder to compete internationally. If the United States offered direct access to markets and lower tariffs, a lot of us would think about it, said Jack Turner, a 28-year-old farmer near Estevan. It's not about hating Canada, it's about survival. Polls suggest this discontent is not isolated. According to an Angus Reid Institute survey conducted in April 2025, 33% of respondents in Saskatchewan and 29% in Alberta said they would consider separation if the federal government continued its current policies, although a clear majority, about 68%, still oppose leaving. Those numbers represent the strongest support for Western autonomy since the 1980 referendum. Another Ipsos poll from September found that only 26% of Canadians nationwide believe the federal system treats all provinces fairly. In Alberta, that figure falls to 18%. The feeling of alienation runs especially high among younger men under 40, small business owners, and those working in energy or agriculture. Premier Danielle Smith has tried to capitalize on this sentiment without appearing reckless. She insists her government remains loyal to Canada, but supports what she calls democratic engagement. In June, her government introduced Bill 54, lowering the threshold for citizen-initiated referendums from 20% to 10% of registered voters. This makes it easier for activists to force a public vote on issues like sovereignty or resource control. When questioned by reporters about whether she supports joining the United States, Smith said, "Albertans are frustrated. They want more control over their future. Talking about that isn't treason, it's democracy." Political analysts see this as a strategic balancing act, a way to channel anger into negotiation leverage rather than open rebellion. Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe has taken a softer tone, saying that while he understands Western frustration, talk of United States statehood is neither practical nor constitutional. Still, he has refused to condemn town halls and community meetings organized by pro-statehood activists, saying that free speech includes unpopular ideas. For critics in Ottawa, this looks like passive encouragement. For Moe's supporters, it's simply listening to the people. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mark Carney faces the most delicate political challenge of his tenure. His government has avoided direct confrontation, hoping the rhetoric will fade. But insiders say divisions within the cabinet are growing. Some ministers want Carney to offer immediate reforms, such as granting Alberta more control over environmental assessments and resource royalties. Others believe any concessions would reward political blackmail. So far, Carney has opted for silence, a decision that many observers say is dangerous. Political scientist Martha Hall Findlay warned recently that if Ottawa treats this as noise, it risks letting a regional grievance turn into a national crisis. Behind the politics lies the economic context. Western Canada's contribution to the national economy remains enormous. Alberta's GDP reached 432 billion Canadian dollars in 2024, growing 3.5% year over year, while Saskatchewan's hit 107 billion with 2.8% growth. Yet unemployment in the oil and agricultural sectors remains higher than the national average. About 6.2% of Alberta's workforce is still jobless, compared to 5.3% nationally. Inflation in Calgary stands at 3.9%, driven by housing shortages and high energy prices. For small and medium enterprises, the costs are crushing. The Alberta Chambers of Commerce reports that 44% of small and medium enterprises in the province expect to reduce staff or close within the next year if economic conditions don't improve. Many owners blame both federal policy and global volatility. Lena Stewart, who runs a 30-employee machinery supplier in Calgary, says her business spends nearly 20% more on compliance and taxes than similar firms in the United States. If we operated under United States rules, we'd be far more competitive, she says. Joining the United States might sound crazy, but the economics make sense. Yet others see that logic as short-sighted. You can't trade your flag for a tax cut, said her accountant, shaking his head. Still, economic pressures have made even radical ideas sound plausible. When survival feels political, loyalty becomes negotiable. The statehood narrative gained international attention after Donald Trump, during a rally in Ohio in September, said, "Why should Alberta sell oil to Ottawa when they can sell it to America?" The comment, met with thunderous applause, reignited speculation about whether Trump's campaign was quietly encouraging Western separatists. While no evidence suggests United States involvement, the symbolism was enough. For weeks, pro-separation groups in Canada used the quote on banners, videos, social media ads. American commentators joined the conversation, some half-jokingly welcoming the 51st and 52nd states. The result was a diplomatic headache for Ottawa and an even deeper divide among Canadians. Energy economists warn that if Alberta and Saskatchewan ever left, the consequences would be devastating. Together, they produce 87% of Canada's crude oil and 65% of its natural gas. Their departure would eliminate nearly $150 billion in annual federal revenue. The Canadian dollar would likely fall by 10 to 15% within months, and national debt could rise above 120% of GDP. Infrastructure would face chaos. Pipelines, transmission lines, and highways that cross provincial borders would suddenly need international treaties to operate. The Bank of Canada would lose billions in collateral reserves tied to Western energy exports. Even conservative think tanks agree that the separation scenario would trigger a prolonged recession. Beyond economics, the social implications are enormous. Canada's western provinces are home to about 7 million people, including nearly 300,000 Indigenous residents whose treaty rights are guaranteed by federal law. Indigenous leaders warn that any move toward statehood could violate those agreements. Chief Gerald Smallboy of the Masquaquis Cree Nation said in a recent interview, "Our treaties are with the Crown, not with Alberta. No province can erase that by joining another country." Legal experts agree. Under Canada's Constitution, Indigenous treaties cannot be transferred to a foreign government without explicit consent. That would mean years of court battles and political instability. Still, supporters of the America Fund say the billboard campaign has already achieved its purpose, forcing Ottawa to listen. "We're not declaring war," said spokesperson Ryan Keller. "We're declaring frustration. If threatening statehood is what it takes to make Ottawa wake up, so be it." Critics accuse the group of exploiting hardship for clicks and donations, but even they admit the tactic is working. Donations to the America Fund reportedly doubled within a week of the billboard's unveiling. The federal government now faces a classic lose-lose situation. If it dismisses the movement as fringe, it risks appearing out of touch. If it cracks down, it could transform a symbolic protest into a martyr's cause. The last time Canada faced a serious unity crisis was Quebec's 1995 referendum, which failed by a razor-thin 1.2%. Back then, the slogan was "We or no." This time, the slogans are flashier, but the emotion feels similar: resentment towards central power and the desire for recognition. Ordinary Canadians are split. A retired teacher in Regina said, "We've been through tough times before. This will blow over." A truck driver in Lethbridge disagreed. "It's not going away this time. We're fed up." Online, hashtags like Western Exit and Statehood outtrend regularly, gathering hundreds of thousands of views. Analysts warn that social media amplification can turn political frustration into a national identity crisis. Every viral post fuels another round of anger, creating a feedback loop that makes compromise harder. For Prime Minister Carney, the path forward is narrow. Experts suggest he could launch a Western Prosperity Accord, similar to the Atlantic Accord of 1985, granting provinces more control over natural resources and revenue sharing. Others propose targeted tax cuts or infrastructure investments to show good faith. Yet even the best policy may not satisfy the emotional side of this divide. As one political commentator put it, "You can fix pipelines, but you can't legislate pride." The crisis unfolding in Alberta and Saskatchewan is not yet secession, but it's leverage. It's a bargaining chip disguised as rebellion. By threatening to walk away, the West has forced Ottawa into a corner, demanding real change or the risk of collapse. The billboard on Highway 2 might vanish in a few weeks, but the anger it represents will not. Whether this ends in reform or rupture depends on whether Canada's leaders can restore trust in a system many now see as broken. The next few months will test not only Mark Carney's leadership, but also the strength of Canadian identity itself. For decades, Alberta and Saskatchewan powered the nation. Now they're asking what they get in return. In every coffee shop, truck stop, and farm across the prairies, one question hangs in the air. If Ottawa keeps ignoring the West, how long before the West stops calling itself Canadian?